This is Iowa Talking Points, the candidates, produced by Studio 5 at Mud Advertising, Totally Iowa Media, and News Talk 1540 KXCL, where you hear from the candidates in contested races in the June 2026 Iowa primary election. Now, Iowa Talking Points, the candidates. From Studio 5 at Mud and Cedar Falls, here is Jeff Stein.
Hello and welcome. There will be a new United States Senator representing Iowa in Washington in January of 2027. It's an open seat due to the retirement of Senator Joni Ernst after 2 terms. There are 2 Republicans seeking their party's nomination to be on the November general election ballot, and one of them joins us at the Iowa Talking Points table today. She is Ashley Hinson, currently a member of Congress, Northeast Iowa 2nd District, first elected in the year 2020, online, ashleyhinson.com. Congresswoman, thank you for the time.
Jeff, great to be with you as always.
So why make the run for U.S. Senate at this point?
Yeah, well, I look around the state and the country, and first of all, let me say I'm so blessed to be an Iowan. I'm so blessed to have the opportunity to live here in this great state and raise my family here. My wonderful husband, Matt, and my boys, we're very, very happy to be proud Iowans. But I look at some of the issues facing Iowa families, and I know that there's more to do there to make life easier, more affordable, get big government out of the way. And that's exactly what I've tried to focus on in my first 3 terms representing Iowans in Congress, and of course before that in the state legislature as well for 2 terms there. So at the core of what I try to do, it's to listen and to solve people's problems. And so I think that's at the core why I'm stepping up to run for the United States Senate.
Now, obviously, with 3 terms in the House, you're building up seniority. Why make the bridge or the jump for a statewide race as opposed to continuing in the district?
Yeah. Well, like I said, there's so much more to do. It's about making sure that health care is affordable and accessible no matter what your zip code is, lowering those premiums, lowering prescription drug prices, standing up for Iowa agriculture. These are all issues that I'm a proven fighter on in Congress, and I know that I can do a good job making sure that Iowa has a strong advocate to continue to tell those stories in Washington, D.C. When I talk about family-related issues and affordability-related issues, Iowans want someone in that seat who understands what they're going through. I've written that check to a daycare. I've filled my kids' lunch accounts. I fill my minivan with gas. So I understand what average families are dealing with every single day. And I think that I can bring that experience and that context, that life experience to the table here.
What are the key issues that will be facing the next Congress? It's almost impossible to predict given how quickly things change. Mm-hmm. But as we sit here just before the primary election, what do you think will be some of the key issues that you as a U.S. Senator will have to address?
Yeah, well, I look at the progress that we've made in the last year and a half, right? I guess rewind to 2 years ago where we were with incredibly open borders, high rampant inflation, major challenges facing our country. We've tried to reverse a lot of that curse in the last year and a half. So I think when you look at the issues we're going to be tackling in the Senate, it's much of the continuation of what we've gotten started on. I like to say the United States right now is kind of like the aircraft carrier out to sea. It takes a long time to turn that around. It's not as nimble as maybe a jet ski on a lake where you can just pop and turn, right? So we are making some great progress in eliminating the waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. You see these stories coming out of Minnesota and California. Just today, the president held a cabinet meeting, and obviously we're taping this in the middle of the afternoon, but he held a cabinet meeting and was featuring some of his cabinet secretaries talking all about the waste, fraud, and abuse that they've uncovered. So it's about continuing that good momentum, and some of that involves Congress. Some of that is the deregulatory agenda of the administration, but the president needs a strong ally in the United States Senate to make sure that we can continue that momentum, and I think that will be a lot of what we have to tackle in the next Congress.
A lot of attention has been focused, and perhaps it's too much inside baseball, but about squabbles within a caucus, and I'm talking about Democrats and Republicans. I'm not singling any out. Talk about some of the skill sets that you've developed as a lawmaker in Des Moines and in Washington that will help serve you as a U.S. Senator in trying to bridge some of those gaps or try to solve some of the issues, the divides that exist?
Yeah, I'm chuckling a little bit about some of the infighting because I tell people all the time, nothing prepares you better to serve in Congress or the United States Senate than being a teenage boy mom because you're negotiating with unreasonable people all the time. They kind of stink. They're stinky and hygiene's questionable, and sometimes nobody gets what they want. I feel like that's the same kind of approach to how I've tried to work with my colleagues. I've built a lot of consensus in Washington, D.C., and I don't see that stopping, but certainly it is challenging when you have a very narrow majority to build consensus on anything. And I look at last year, what we were able to get across the line in the Working Families Tax Cut bill, real relief and targeted help for the American people and our small businesses so that they could have the certainty they need to make investments. That took a lot of people working together from all over the country to get that done. It included 1,100 pieces of legislation. That doesn't happen by accident. So I'm willing to work with anyone who will help me get Iowa's priorities done. And I think that bill is just one example of that. I've gotten 2 bills signed by President Biden that I'm proud to have worked across the aisle on. Many of the priorities that I've delivered on are because I've been on the House Appropriations Committee. So I understand how to make sure we're cutting wasteful spending while still getting those key investments in Iowa. So I look at narrow majorities and building consensus as a great challenge, but a great opportunity, and I have success and a proven track record of getting things done.
I've heard Congress referred to as a bunch of preschoolers. I don't remember teenage boys as an example.
Middle school, high school. I mean, all things could be kind of indicative of how Congress feels a lot of the time. But, I will say this, too, that what you see in the press and some of the headlines, they always talk about what we're fighting about, right? Which is their job is to cover the disagreements, but there is still a lot that we all agree on. I serve on the China Select Committee as well, so I've done a lot on the policy toward being competitive with the Chinese Communist Party. That is probably the most bipartisan committee in Congress right now. We put out a lot of good policy. We support a lot of the same things. I've worked with Raja Krishnamurthy from Illinois on many, many pieces of policy that are designed to help make America stronger. And so there are places where we do still align and agree and can build that consensus across the aisle. But again, my policy approach is I'll work with anyone, but if they're wrong or it's a really bad idea, I'm going to call it out too.
What have you learned about the process in Washington that's different from the experience in Des Moines? And how have you adapted how you handle things to meet those distinctions?
Yeah. So it's a little bit different scale, right? You just represent a lot more people. And so I think I have the knowledge to be able to set up a really good Senate office focused on customer service, because at the end of the day, that's what we do. My job is to tell Iowan stories, make sure we're delivering on those promises through legislation, but also it's to navigate many of the challenges that people might face in dealing with government agencies. So I look at the now 18 people that I can have on my staff in Congress. It's more than that in the Senate. And I look forward to making sure we have an office that's set up exactly that same way. So again, small business focus. I have my executive division, me and my chief of staff, right? Then I have my legislative division. Those folks are the people who now help me to draft a bill. So if I have an idea that I got from a stop, let's say out on my 99 county tour in Iowa, hey, we're going to help people find a way to save more money for a down payment to buy their first home, because that's a huge barrier that we hear from people all the time, affordability and being able to get into their home. Okay, so then I go to my legislative team and I say, this is the idea. Let's craft based upon working with these agencies and HUD and Treasury or whatever agency might be at the table. We can build that consensus around the legislation. And so I think I have the skill set now to know how to do that effectively and then get good pieces across the finish line as well.
The next U.S. Senate and the House, ultimately, but the next U.S. Senator is going to have to address Social Security because during, whoever is elected during that term, we're going to become insolvent. Automatic cuts are going to kick in. I think it's 2031. So what are some things that you as a U.S. Senator would look toward, some possibilities, solutions, ideas, to make sure we don't have these mandatory cuts and an insolvent Social Security system? Yeah,
well, and of course I want to make sure those benefits are there for people who've earned them. They absolutely deserve their benefits. So I want to just say that anyone who's focused on talking about cuts to Social Security, that's a heck no from me. My parents are, retirement age. I know so many seniors in my congressional district, and obviously I've met a lot more around the state as I've been on my 99 county tour, and I understand how important that is to folks. What I want to say is that I think we've started making the right steps to eliminate a lot of the fraud and waste in these programs, whether it's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. All of those programs have people receiving benefits who shouldn't be receiving them right now. The numbers are in the billions. And so when you look at what we can do to help preserve the longevity of these programs, that's one step of it. The other step, I think, is looking at young people right now, because ultimately it's a give and a take in terms of who's paying in and who's taking the benefits on the other side. And we need to make sure that our young people are also saving money on the front end. Millennials, I'm a millennial, are historically the absolute worst at saving money. So we need to have some serious conversations about how we make sure that not only are the resources coming into the program, but also that people are saving money so that in the long run, we reduce maybe some of that reliance on it. So I think the Trump accounts are a really great way where we're setting some people up for early success, right? That's starting right now, but it's one kind of approach that we can take long term to try to maybe put take some of the pressure off of Social Security in the long run as well.
Ashley Hinson is our guest. She is currently a member of the U.S. House and would like to be a U.S. Senator, seeking Republicans' vote in the primary on June 2nd. More with Congresswoman Hinson as Iowa Talking Points, the candidates, continues in a moment.
All the great news talk programs you love from KXCL on your radio can be with you wherever you go.
I'm Todd Starnes.
This is Mark Levin.
I'm Tim Harwood.
Bill O'Reilly here.
I'm Kim Commando.
Hey, it's Glenn Beck.
I'm Jeff Stein.
Just download the free KXCL mobile app. You can find us in the App Store or Google Play. Make sure you never miss a second of the conversation. Download the KXCL app today. It's a great way to stay connected to where Iowa comes to talk.
One opportunity. Change your career. Mudd Advertising is hiring product specialists. $20 an hour, paid weekly. That's 52 weeks a year plus record-breaking profit sharing. Let me repeat, $20 an hour plus record-breaking profit sharing. But we're just getting started. The best in the business, 401k, company match, gold standard health plans, on-site fitness center, generous paid time off, and so much more. Apply today and don't look back.
You're watching Iowa Talking Points, the candidates. Here again is Jeff Stein.
And we continue with Ashley Hinson. She is a Republican running for the nomination for U.S. Senate in the June 2nd primary, currently a member of the U.S. House. Many people know you now from 3 terms in Congress, but tell us a bit more about your background for those who may not be aware.
Yeah, well, I'm, like I said just a few minutes ago, I'm a very proud, born and raised Iowan. Grew up in the central part of the state in West Des Moines. I went to Valley High School. I actually left the state to go to college, which actually taught me a lot about how great we have it here in Iowa. And I came back. I wanted to live here, work here, and raise my family here. So moved back to Cedar Rapids in 2005. And that's where I've been for the past 20 plus years. And I had my career as a journalist before I decided to get into the crazy world of politics. And I love to tell Iowan stories, but most importantly, I love to listen to people tell their stories. I've learned about so many great examples of the goodness of Iowans over the past 20 plus years in this career. But I will say that I think what inspired me to run was the fact that I had seen what went really, really well and what went really, really poorly as I was having those conversations out in the viewing area, obviously, when I worked for KCRG. But moved back to Cedar Rapids in 2005. I said, I'm going to have my career. I'm not going to have a boyfriend. Met my husband like a month later. That's how that always goes, right? When never say what you'll never do is one thing I've learned. But I met him, and the rest is history. We got married in 2008. Have 2 beautiful boys. Max is 15. They're almost done with school, which is kind of wild for the year. So he's just a freshman this year. And then my other one, Jax, is in 7th grade. So proud mom. My husband's an insurance agent in the area. And we have the American dream is what I look at. My experience here in Iowa and now the ability to serve Iowans in this capacity, I think I'm the luckiest gal alive.
We were talking in the last segment, I brought up Social Security, and there's a give and take on prioritization for spending, obviously. Mm-hmm. And by the time of the general election this year, we're going to have a, $40 trillion deficit. That's going to take generations to pay off. So we either run that up or we modify how we apportion the spending that we're doing.
Yeah.
Tell us how we improve this situation. You mentioned cutting down on waste and fraud, but that isn't going to solve everything, I trust.
Yeah, well, and if you look at the federal budget, actually, since I serve on the Appropriations Committee, I've learned a thing or two about the federal budgets. But I will tell you this, that you could cut every ounce of discretionary spending right now, and it wouldn't do anything to address that number, which is what's really scary, I think. And we are doing our part to try to reel that in. Many of the agencies saw a 20 to 30% increase in their budgets during COVID. That's just not sustainable, and I don't think was ever really the intent for that to be long running. But the ranking member on our committee, who's the Democrat, has said she doesn't think we have a spending problem. She thinks we have a revenue problem, and I think that's the wrong approach here. I think we need to be reeling in these out of control budgets, these agencies that had major plus ups in their staffing, because all that does then long term is it drives the cost of government for taxpayers, because not only is that benefits, it's long-term retirements, it's all of those things that then end up compounding the cost for taxpayers. So I want to see that growth happen in the private sector, and that's exactly what we're seeing happen now. In the last 2 to 3 months, you've seen hundreds of thousands of jobs all created in the private sector, and you've also seen, I think SBA put this stat out recently, that there were 1 million small business startups, right? That's where that growth needs to happen, and the only way you reverse that curse is if you have enough growth to turn the curve the other way. So I want to see that happen again through the private sector, not through continued government growth, and not just through adding tax after tax after tax, because I don't think that inspires growth either.
It's interesting because, again, and you and I have talked previously on the radio about your work with the budget and the Appropriations Committee, but if during the COVID time or as a result of COVID, here's this double-digit bump up for people, nobody thought before you got there, nobody thought to say, maybe we ought to move it back to pre-COVID levels. That seems like the kind of thing that should have been a non-starter, but apparently I don't understand government.
Yeah. Well, and in 2021, when I came into Congress, I served in the minority, right? So I was in under Speaker Pelosi. Chuck Schumer had the Senate, and we had President Biden. And the spending spigot was just on and on and on. I voted against $6 trillion worth of government spending in my first term alone. So when I think about what that did, and the borrowing and the interest rates going up and the inflation, we were at 8-9% inflation in 2022 because of all that government spending. That's, again, the wrong approach. So we are trying to reverse course on a lot of that. I mentioned, kind of thinking about the country as an aircraft carrier right now. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're doing the slow turn, and it takes a while to cement those policies. The other thing I think that I'm inspired by right now, and I think will have a big impact on the cost of things. It will also have a big impact on the expense of things long-term for government. But they are deregulating. Every single government agency has been tasked with looking at regulations. Are they actually designed to keep someone safe, or are they politically motivated? And so they are doing everything they can. EPA is a great example of that. They just a few weeks ago eliminated a refrigerant rule that was driven by climate change and woke ideology, and wasn't actually driven to it didn't have a real purpose. And so it just drove costs, right? Because everybody had to comply with this new regulation. So that's just one example, but every single agency is going through that process right now. And I think that will drive down costs for consumers long term.
I've heard a number of Republicans who are Trump supporters weigh in with a bit of disapproval about members of Congress for not codifying more of the president's agenda. For example, government by executive order is just kind of like the pendulum that swings depending on who's in office. Yeah. For those folks who say, well, why aren't you doing more to enact what he is doing with the stroke of his pen? What's the answer? Because, again, it's not as easy as some may like to think.
Yeah, no, and you got to work everything through the process. And there's one thing I've learned. You talk about building consensus. Some things are hard to build consensus around. But I have tried to introduce pieces of legislation to codify many of those executive orders. Some things have passed the House. Maybe they get stalled out in the Senate. What I think we should approach is the common sense things that have maybe 70 to 80% public approval, right? And there are a lot of those things. I think we can all agree, for example, that the Treasury should not be sending out payments unfettered. There should be codes attached to everything to make sure it's going to who it's supposed to go to. What a novel idea, right? Well, until Scott Bessent took over at Treasury, they weren't doing that. So you had $500 billion potentially in improper payments go out over the last 5-6 years, right? That's talk about being disrespectful to taxpayers. So I've introduced the legislation that would codify that. So you still have to go through the committee process and move everything forward. So I wish we could do more quickly. And that is frustrating. There are days when I want to just beat my head against the wall in Congress across the board that things don't move quickly. But I do think we've gotten a lot done already in the last year and a half. I want to make sure President Trump can be a 4-year president and doesn't face immediate impeachment, which is what it will be on day one if Democrats take the House and the Senate. So it's a difference between a 24-hour impeachment trial and a 24-month impeachment trial.
The mood in Washington, near as I can tell, is, I don't know that toxic is the word, but it is certainly, if you say you want to get along with the other side, sometimes you get shunned by your own side because, again, whose side are you on, that sort of thing. How difficult is it to navigate? And again, I'm making a presumption. If my presumption is wrong, please correct me, but it seems that it's harder now to navigate than it might have been in recent memory anyway.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a great story from a veterans town hall that I did last fall. And I stopped into a place in Cedar Rapids, and I had one Democrat veteran there who said, I appreciate that you are willing to work across the aisle. And then a Republican piped up and he was like, I'm not, I want to do. So you talk about like that actually happening in real life. I mean, I've experienced that in person. Look, I think, again, to the point of what Iowans want to see, they just want to see someone who's going to get results for them, who understands what they're going through, who's going to listen. And that's what I've always tried to do through serving in the minority and serving in the majority. And I understand, I try to make most people happy. And as my husband says, everybody's crazy in the world, Ashley, but me and you, and I'm beginning to wonder about you. And, everybody has their own little circle that they can sometimes end up in a, I guess you call it, snow globe or whatever, like isolated. But I've always tried to focus on the signal, not the noise. Let's get some stuff done. Let's deliver for Iowans. And that's going to be my governing approach, no matter who has the gavel and no matter who's in the White House.
Ashley Hinson is currently a member of the U.S. House seeking the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate in the June primary. More with Congresswoman Hinson as Iowa Talking Points, The Candidates, continues in a moment.
One opportunity. Change your career. Mudd Advertising is hiring product specialists. $20 an hour, paid weekly. That's 52 weeks a year, plus record-breaking profit sharing. Let me repeat, $20 an hour plus record-breaking profit sharing. But we're just getting started. The best in the business, 401k, company match, gold standard health plans, on-site fitness center, generous paid time off, and so much more. Apply today and don't look back.
Watch all the programs in the Iowa Talking Points series online at iowatalkingpoints.com. Iowa Talking Points, The Candidates, continues with Jeff Stein.
And we continue with Ashley Hinson, a Republican seeking her party's nomination for U.S. Senate in the June primary election. You have one opponent on the Republican ballot. Separate yourself for Iowa Republicans who are trying to make a choice.
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, I have a great record of delivering for Iowans, first as a state representative in a very competitive part of the state, and second, as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. I've fought to make sure Iowans' priorities are heard and delivered on, first and foremost, respecting taxpayers. Second, making sure rural America has a seat at the table. And third, making sure we have a safe and secure country. So you talk about delivering on those campaign promises. I have done that. And that's my pitch to Republican voters is you want a strong conservative who has a spine, who's going to deliver, who's going to be an ally to the president to get the agenda done. That's exactly what I have done over these past 3 terms in the House. And I look forward to being the next United States Senator.
More online, ashleyhinson.com. As we look at some of the things in the U.S. Senate, there are various rules. Many of them are misunderstood by folks who don't know why can't we just do this or that, and there are exceptions to rules. And again, the president weighs in on occasion. Give us a sense of your view on some of the Senate rules and procedures, et cetera, because each Senate gets to vote on these at the start of a new Congress, but anytime. And so obviously it's filibuster, it's et cetera.
Yeah, well, and I would love to see the budgetary process move forward without a filibuster in place, just because I think that having 51, I think we would spend a lot less. I understand why it's there, because it has kept bad policy from moving forward, and it does protect the minority party as well. So you think about when the senators were, when it was a Democrat-controlled Senate, we stopped a lot of bad things from happening. So that is kind of, when you look at the devil being in the details for Senate rules, you can stop a lot of bad policy. If you don't have that fail-safe there, certainly you think about packing the courts, or you think about adding the states of Puerto Rico or D.C. Those are all very real possibilities should the filibuster go away. And I do get frustrated that some good policy doesn't get through the Senate. I just, again, will be focused, laser focused on moving forward with consensus building wherever I can. But again, you have to get to 51 only for some things as well. And one very important part of that is the advise and consent. That is the role of the Senate. You talk about the TDS being on full display in the United States Senate. Democrats have deliberately stopped many of the president's nominees from being able to move forward. And this is the first time, I think, in they went back 70, 80 years to look at, has this kind of obstructionism existed before? And it has not. So unfortunately, what's happened is they have eaten, when it normally would have been things that were approved by unanimous consent or in block, the Democrats have eaten up a lot of the calendar time for floor debate. And I think that's wrong, because we have moved forward understanding that sometimes there's a Democrat in the White House, sometimes there's a Republican in the White House. This is the first time we've seen that kind of level of obstruction in holding up the president's nominees. So I'm hopeful we're able to get some good forward progress there. Again, continue to deliver on Iowans and Americans' priorities. I think what we did last year with 51 votes, the reconciliation process in the Senate, you have to get to 218 in the House. But delivering on that tax reform, that real relief, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, reduced taxes on Social Security for so many of our seniors, the certainty for our businesses, we got that through with 51 votes. Right now, we're dealing with an issue with funding DHS, parts of CBP and ICE, because Democrats won't come to the table. We offered them many reforms, and so we're having to do a workaround, 51 votes through reconciliation in the Senate. So again, those are some of the strange rules obviously involved in governing in the Senate, but I'm learning a lot about those now. I know the House really well, obviously, and I look forward to navigating that process in the Senate.
I've asked a lot of candidates, because this is a partisan primary, what does it mean to be a Democrat or a Republican? Because even within that category, there are various, I don't want to say factions, but categories. So I'll just ask you straight up. You're a Republican. What does that mean to you? Yeah.
Well, for me, it means making sure that the government is limited as much as possible while still making those targeted investments that taxpayers expect. At the bare minimum, the federal government should be providing safety and security for our country, which is something I think we all hope for and want. So being a Republican for me means standing up for those values. You talk about our Constitution and what it's crafted on. I have in my office out in Washington, D.C., my Bible open to the Golden Rule, because I think it's important that we approach governing with that Christian mindset and having that approach to governing. So that's what guides me as a Republican. Faith, family, freedom, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is why I'm a Republican.
What does it mean to be an American? And that is, the question is predicated on the fact that we're going to a lot of places around the world. The audience knows where and the status as they're watching this conversation. So what's the role of America in some of these global conflicts or situations?
Well, first of all, I think America is the greatest country in the world, hands down. There's no competition about it. We have the freest, most fair country in the entire world. It's why people want to flock here. Everybody wants to become an American, and people value their relationship with our country because of that, because we've had strength, because we've been able to help deliver peace through strength. That is why people want to engage with the United States and see us as an incredible ally. And I applaud President Trump for his work in making sure we're moving the ball forward for safety and security, not just here at home with securing our borders, but also around the world by holding these terrible actors like the Iranian regime accountable. I hope we're able to end the conflict with Ukraine and Russia very, very soon also. And then standing up to people who could be problems in the future, like North Korea and China as well. So I think about, America's role in that, and what it means to be an American is to help around the world, be a leader, to help make sure we're offering that same dream of safety, security, and prosperity to anyone who wants freedom around the world.
What do people not understand or misunderstand about you and your positions?
I think I've tried to be as transparent and accessible to people as possible, and I've traveled not only my congressional district but around the state. I do a weekly press call, I do town halls, so I'm pretty straight with people about where I am on issues and why, and that's always been my approach. Is I'm going to try and make sure I always know the facts, because let's face it, there's a lot of stuff circulating on Twitter and social media, and that's not necessarily always true. And so I'm going to do my due diligence, as I said earlier, focus on the signal and not the noise, to make sure I'm always doing my homework and making a sound decision. If you do that, I think people respect that. So I wouldn't say that's misunderstood. I just want people to know my process for as I'm taking these votes and as I'm making decisions and choosing what pieces of legislation to introduce, whether it's to help support childcare here in Iowa, workforce, public safety related issues, maternal health care related issues. Every single one of those, I have been transparent and honest about the why, and then why I'm introducing legislation to follow through on that promise.
If you are elected to the U.S. Senate, winning in the primary, then the general election, what are some of the committees that you might seek from your caucus?
Well, I think Iowa is a pretty focused on agriculture state, and so I would love to continue the legacy of making sure Iowa has a seat on the Agriculture Committee. I love the judiciary process. I think about, I talked about advise and consent and how important that is. I think as a former journalist, I know how to ask a few tough questions from time to time and do that vetting of those nominees, and I know that happens through judiciary. I do love being an appropriator. You talk about actually being able to deliver for your state and make sure that the state's priorities are met. Iowans are dutifully sending that tax check into the federal government. We need to make sure that we are good stewards of those resources. As I said, going in and knowing exactly where to target things and where to cut things is something that I have worked very hard on these past few years. So I look forward to bringing all of that knowledge now to the United States Senate. But at the end of the day, I think that there are a lot of great opportunities. I want to go where I can be most effective to help deliver on Iowa's priorities.
Ashley Hinson is running for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate in the June primary. AshleyHinson.com is the website. One more segment as Iowa Talking Points, the candidates, continues after this. Iowa has a wonderful heritage, and each day I'll share these stories of historic people and events with you. I'm Jeff Stein. Join me for the Iowa Almanac program and learn more about this great place we call home. Now 7 days a week. Listen on radio stations across the state, via podcast, or at iowaalmanac.com.
One opportunity. Change your career. Mudd Advertising is hiring product specialists. $20 an hour, paid weekly. That's 52 weeks a year, plus record-breaking profit sharing. Let me repeat, $20 an hour plus record-breaking profit sharing. But we're just getting started. The best in the business: 401k, company match, gold standard health plans, on-site fitness center, generous paid time off, and so much more. Apply today and don't look back.
You're watching Iowa Talking Points, the candidates. Here again is Jeff Stein.
A few more minutes with 2nd District Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, that's Northeast Iowa. She's running for the Republican nomination to the U.S. Senate. AshleyHinson.com is the website. Earlier we were talking about how things were just a few years ago, how things are now. This is very much a what have you done for me lately society, but give us a sense of where we are now as opposed to when you first came to Congress nearly 6 years ago?
I think about that time. 2020 was when I was elected, right, to Congress, and that was deep in the middle of COVID and all of the lockdowns, and D.C. was locked down. I've tried to make D.C. run a whole lot more like Iowa in the past 5-6 years, and I think we've done a good job of doing that. But I think one thing, as I was traveling my congressional district in that time, 2021, 2022, people were feeling like they had a government that was too big, that was hounding them with regulations. I mentioned earlier I had voted against $6 trillion in spending. That was driving rampant inflation. And so I think you talk about what have we done for you lately. We've tried to get that inflation down. Again, the deregulatory environment right now, we've made major progress there. And then I think this split screen that plays out in my head of where we were with the border just about 2.5 years ago, record border crossings. Now we're working on getting dangerous criminal illegals out of our country and focused on making sure that there is a right way and a wrong way to come to this country, and we're working on that process. But I think people need to remind themselves of where we were just a couple of years ago with that open border and that rampant inflation, and what we've done to try to reverse that curse and change course here in this country.
You mentioned the reconciliation bill that was signed on Independence Day last year.
Yeah.
And some of those who are running for their party's nomination in this race have characterized it as a bad thing, et cetera. Give us a sense of some of the things that are in that bill that you're most proud of having supported.
Well, one of the first priorities that I wanted to get accomplished when I went to Congress was making sure that the small business tax exemption was permanent. In the 2017 tax cuts, it was made temporary, it sunsetted. But when I talked to small businesses on main streets and in our communities around Iowa, they said, hey, we love that. We just need it to be permanent so that we can know the rules of engagement here and we can make investments in our businesses. So getting that done as a part of that bill was a huge win to make sure we're spurring that, again, that growth in the private sector. And we're seeing that kind of investment happen all over Iowa, no matter what the zip code is, whether it's rural or suburban areas of our state. I look at other things that we were able to do to really provide relief for Iowans. The no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security. Leader Thune was here in Iowa a few weeks ago with me, and we did a roundtable to talk with people who had positive experiences with the legislation that we passed. And one lady said she was a gig worker with Uber. She had used the no tax on autos, or the tax deduction for new autos, which is a good thing for the American auto industry, by the way. But she had used that to be able to buy a car, so she'd go out and drive Uber, and then she was not paying tax on the tips she was making as an Uber driver, which enabled her to make the choice to put her child in private school because she could afford to do that. So I think that's a real example of those dollars helping someone who needed it, and then them being able to do what they wanted to do with it instead of the government. No tax on overtime. We had a worker at that roundtable who was talking about picking up an extra shift and taking on those hours, and that increases the productivity at our manufacturers, which enables them to do better. And so I look at all of those provisions of the bill that we were able to get passed. I'm so proud of the work we did to, again, find consensus, getting to 218 in the House, and then getting it passed in the Senate, and then signed into law by President Trump.
You mentioned education, and obviously here in the state of Iowa, we now have the education savings accounts, and that has dramatically changed the landscape for K-12 in this state. The president has some thoughts about the education department. Some have expected that with a stroke of a pen it could just go away. That obviously could never happen. But what would you like to see happen with regard to the federal government's role, defining that role in education?
Yeah. Well, I've always been a big proponent of, you talk about making sure parents are empowered, getting as many of those dollars back to parents so they can make the choice. My kids are in public school. I'm a product of public school, but I respect parents who want to make that choice and put their kids in private school. I feel the same about the Department of Education. I think states know best how to administer educational priorities. The curriculum is best closest to the students. And so I would like to see as many of those dollars flow directly to states to then be a little bit more competitive on education, right? I think Iowa has a great potential to reclaim the mantle in terms of education. We've made some really great progress thanks to Governor Reynolds and many of the state policies that have been into place. But there's more we can do to make sure we're empowering the next generation with the right education, no matter if that's in a private school or a public school.
You mentioned you've hit every one of the 99 counties in Iowa in this primary election campaign. What has that experience either taught you about yourself or taught you about areas of the state that again, you're from central Iowa, you've lived in eastern Iowa, areas you may not have spent a lot of time in previously.
Yeah. Well, no matter where I go, all 99 Iowans are common sense people, and that's what I can tell you. They'll tell it to you straight. One thing we do really well here, I think because we're the first in the nation state, we vet our candidates really well. So Iowans are going to ask you a tough question, but they're also going to level with you and give you some good ideas. And so as I've traveled the state, hearing directly from folks, I've come away with really good ideas. I joke that I ate and drank my way through because I've had more coffees than I can count. And I think I started my tour basically at a potato chip factory. So, I mean, it's great to see and peel back the curtain on some amazing things happening in our state. And so I think about my role and my megaphone that I have to go and tell everybody why Iowa is so great. Hearing those stories out on my 99 county tour gives me all the ammunition I need to go out and do that. And so I'm very proud to have been all over the state. Look forward to traversing the state again. I'm making my way around right now ahead of the primary, and look forward to doing that and going out and earning every vote for the general election.
We have just a few minutes left, and you're asking Iowa Republicans to choose you as they vote for U.S. Senate in the June primary, and I'll let you take these last minutes and make that case to them directly.
Well, thank you, Jeff. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in and hearing a little bit more about me. I'm the common sense minivan driving mom who wants to be your next U.S. Senator. And my pledge to you is I will continue to work hard. I will listen. I will travel to every part of the state, no matter what your zip code is. I've grown up in the biggest city in the state, but also been on my 99 county tour to the smallest county, the smallest city in our state in Decatur County. So I will do the work and put in those times and hours to make sure that I'm delivering for you. My pledge is to continue to respect taxpayers, make sure rural America has a seat at the table, and continue to fight for a safe and secure future for everyone, and including that next generation. So my boys are part of it. I'm fighting for families just like yours.
AshleyHinson.com is the website. Congresswoman, thank you for the time. Good luck, Jeff, on June 2nd.
Thank you very much.
Ashley Hinson, Congresswoman presently from Northeast Iowa, the 2nd District, seeking her party's nomination, Republican, for U.S. Senate in the primary. And that brings us to the close of this edition of Iowa Talking Points, the Candidates. Thank you for being with us.
This has been Iowa Talking Points, the Candidates, produced by Studio 5 at Mud Advertising, Totally Iowa Media, and News Talk 1540 KXCL. For more information on this series, go to iowatalkingpoints.com.